Hi, my name is Jonathan Achampong and I'm a lawyer specialising in residential property law. The differences between freehold and leasehold tenure can be confusing, and some of the distinctions between the different forms of property tenure is something we've talked about in a previous post. So if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth checking out. But I'm still seeing a lot of confusion. A lot of confusion about what that phrase share a freehold really means. So let's talk about it. Buying a share of freehold means that you will acquire a shared ownership of the freehold title relating to the building, as well as a leasehold interest in the individual flat. So there are two interests being acquired. Taking first the freehold interest, well, sometimes the freehold title is registered in the name of a company in which the flat owners will be shareholders. So when the phrase share a freehold is used in that context, it means you own a share in the company that holds the freehold title. In other instances, the freehold title can be registered in the individual names of up to 4 individuals, and sometimes that arrangement is in place where you have smaller buildings of perhaps 2 or 3 up to 4 flats. But that's the freehold interest, of which you will have shared ownership with a typical share of freehold acquisition. It's important to bear in mind that there's also the leasehold interest in the individual flat that you will have the right to enjoy and occupy. Remember, where you have a leasehold interest, you have a lease. And what is a lease? Well, a lease, in brief terms, is a contractual arrangement between at least 2 parties, a landlord and a tenant, in which the tenant has the right to exclusively use and occupy the flat for a fixed period of time. Whenever a lease is involved, the wording of the lease will be very important, because a lease will contain all sorts of provisions relating to, for example, the lease term. How long is the lease? That's a crucial question, one that will be answered in the lease. The lease will also contain important information about the landlord's obligations, the tenant's obligations, extent of the demise, the individual flat, any rights granted to the flat owner, any rights reserved on behalf of the landlord or other owners or occupiers within the building. The lease will contain provisions regarding your ability to undertake alterations. Are structural alterations permitted? Is the landlord's prior written consent required? The lease will contain provisions relating to flooring, for example, for the keeping of pets. As you can see, it's a very important document. And I would say this is perhaps the aspect that is sometimes forgotten by prospective purchasers or even owners of share of freehold properties. Owning a share of freehold does not entitle a flat owner to simply ignore the terms of their lease. So if a lease prohibits alterations without the landlord's prior written consent, then that means you can't just alter your individual flat however you see fit. If, for example, the lease has 50 years remaining on the lease term and you're purchasing with the aid of a mortgage, in all likelihood the lease will need to be extended. Why? Because the lender will require that you do so. After all, it's over the leasehold interest that their charge is going to be registered. So again, the provisions of the lease remain important for any prospective purchaser or owner of a flat which comes with a share of freehold. Okay, so let's talk about some advantages and disadvantages of owning a flat which comes with a share of freehold. Advantages. Well, the obvious advantage to kick things off is that by having a share of freehold, it gives the flat owner a direct say in what happens in the common parts or the estate or the building. The flat owner is also jointly with others his landlord. That's one advantage. Another advantage is that owning a share of freehold should make it easier to extend the lease. I say should because it's sometimes not entirely straightforward, but that's something we'll talk about in another post. Another benefit of owning a share of freehold is that flats that come with that share of freehold are often seen as more attractive, so they can often be more marketable and can command a better sales price. So there are some clear advantages of owning a flat which comes with a share of freehold, but there are, I don't know if I'd call it disadvantages, but certainly things one ought to be aware of in a share of freehold situation. Look, buildings need to be managed, and if the management of a building is not dealt with in an efficient manner, your share of freehold sort of dream purchase can turn into a poorly managed building nightmare. Another thing to factor in is that if you own a share of freehold, then the landlord's responsibilities are likely to become your responsibility in some way, shape or form. So you'll be responsible for insuring the building, you'll be responsible for commissioning a fire risk assessment where relevant, you'll be responsible for commissioning an asbestos risk survey, again where relevant. You'll be responsible for gathering funds to cover the costs relating to any expenditure for things relating to the building. So there are some management responsibilities which will need to be taken on and dealt with in order to ensure the smooth running of the building. In summary, really, I would say this. Owning a flat which comes with a share of freehold is generally a good thing, and in many ways, it can be viewed as a more complete form of property ownership compared to a situation where you might acquire an ownership of the leasehold interest only with no share of freehold. But there are things to be aware of. I'd much rather own a flat which didn't come with a share of freehold, that was a flat which met my needs in a building that's well maintained and managed, than own a share of freehold with dilapidated common parts and a building not looking great, and tensions between the tenants and so on and so forth. But if you're in the process of buying or selling a property that has a share of freehold, it's important that you instruct a good lawyer to assist with the transaction. Once again, my name is Jonathan Achampong. I'm a property lawyer specializing in residential property law. If you found this useful or know anyone that will, please do hit the like, share, follow or subscribe button, and I'll be back again soon with more replies to frequently asked conveyancing questions.